Crawford here, psychologist, speaker, author of 8 books, host of 2 PBS specials, here again to bring you another tip on how to help you create the life you want. Specifically, how to use my life from the top of the mind philosophy to bring more clarity, confidence, creativity into everything you do. Today I want to bring more clarity into the concept of guilt, shame, and regret. What's the difference between the two? Or the three? There is an actual quote that I'm sending out to those 6,000 folks on my quote list. If you would like to be one of those folks and receive one of my favorite quotes along with a video each week, just go to my website, Ph.D.com, hit the subscribe button, put your name, email address. Every week I'll send you one of these. So this is a quote, one of mine. It says, "Regret is acknowledging that we made a mistake. Shame is fearing that we are a mistake. And guilt is what others use to try to make us feel ashamed." I like that because I think it brings some clarity to those 3 concepts: guilt, shame, and regret. And it really has to do with how do we learn from mistakes. Given that we aren't perfect, we will be making some mistakes, maybe this afternoon. So I think we've got to recognize this, okay, given that it's a given that it's going to happen, how do we want to deal with it? Because I think a lot of us have grown up to think and believe that when we make a mistake, we should feel really guilty, we should feel really ashamed, and that guilt and that shame and that bad feeling will keep us from making a mistake again. Understandable, and I'm sure this was done by people who loved us and wanted us to be good people and have a good life. The problem is, especially for those of you who follow my life from the top of the mind, you know that guilt and shame and fear and all of those negative emotions actually throw us into a certain part of the brain. That's that lower part of the brain called the brainstem. This is where our fight or flight responses are located. So when we need to be angry or afraid and need to fight something or run away from something, that's perfect. But when we're trying to learn from a mistake, getting thrown into the lower reactive brain is not where we learn. It's just where we feel bad. And so I'm not a big believer in feeling bad in order to do good, especially when it has to do with brain science. What I think we want to do is access this clear, confident, creative part of who we are. Be able to access the best qualities, who we are at our best. In order to do that, we got to shift to what I call the top of the mind, or this upper 80% of the brain called the neocortex. In order to do that, I think we can use regret in a way to do that, because regret acknowledges that I made a mistake. By the way, you may have seen one of my videos where I talk about a mistake is a mistake. It's an action that we took that missed. The original word of meaning of the word sin was an archery term. It meant to miss the mark. So rather than needing to feel ashamed or guilty or bad when we make a mistake, we could go, okay, good information. Knowing what I know now, how would I do that differently in the future? That allows us to access our learning and project that learning into the future, so we go into the future making good decisions from the clear, confident, creative part of who we are, this upper 80% of the brain. So if you are a human being, and therefore you might make some mistakes going forward, I suggest we become very clear about how we want to deal with that. So we don't just let old learning influence how we find ourselves dealing with it and continue to do that without really looking at that and asking the question, is this really working for me? Would I really recommend this to someone I love? Now, I know people who are proponents of shame and guilt will say, well, people who have no shame or guilt are sociopaths and they just don't care about anything. But again, what that says is we have to feel bad in order to do good. I just don't believe that. I think we can look at our mistakes, recognize we have some regret for making the mistake, own the mistake so we're not blaming it on somebody else, but also not make it about our lack of worth or what's wrong with us. We can say, okay, good information, knowing what I know now, here's what I would do differently in the future. We can imagine doing that. That kind of is almost like a behavioral rehearsal that puts into place us beginning to do something differently in the future based on what we've learned from the mistake. We use awareness versus shame or guilt in order to motivate ourselves to make better decisions in the future. If this is something you think would be good for your organization, your church, your school, your family, feel free to contact me. I love to go around the world teaching people my life from the top of the mind philosophy, where we actually access the best of who we are by accessing a very specific part of the brain. And avoid the stress and frustration, anxiety, depression, the stuff that gets in the way of our clarity, confidence, and creativity by avoiding a specific part of the brain. If that's something you're interested in, go to my website, hit the contact button, let me know what you're interested in. Love to talk with you about that. In the meantime, feel free to follow me on all the social medias, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, iTunes, Twitter. I post these every week on one of those. And again, if you would like to receive one of my favorite quotes along with a video each week, all you got to do is go to the website, hit the subscribe button. I would be happy to do that. In the meantime, here's to you, bringing more clarity, confidence, creativity into everything you do. And I look forward to seeing you in the future.